In the 1980s, young Chinese began regularly flocking to Hong Kong. With dreams of getting rich, they fled a country bled dry by 30 years of Maoism, and many of them became Triad members. Soon, China would wake up, and the colonialist order, in which the Triads flourished, would be turned on its head. Of Portuguese nationality, Stanley Ho was the richest man in Macau, a Portuguese colony of 600,000 inhabitants, a stone's throw from Hong Kong. He reigned over the city's main source of wealth, the casinos.
Do you gamble?
No, I don't. Because I've learned that after all, you never win. As long as you come back, then I think you give it all back to me.
Stanley Ho obtained a government-granted monopoly for casinos from the Portuguese authorities in the 1960s. After that, every governor of Macau was a guest of honor at Ho's annual ballroom dancing competition. Prohibited elsewhere, casinos attracted gamblers from Hong Kong, but also from Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia, reflecting the region's economic boom. The casino would also draw another kind of gambler. Like one young Chinese man who started out in the Hong Kong underworld as a member of the 14K.
Our boss would say to us, enjoy yourselves, but don't take drugs. I took some sometimes, but not broken tooth. He was more ambitious. He was smart, so he ended up settling in Macau. He had big plans.
Broken Tooth soon understood what brought in the big money to the Macau casinos.
Stanley Ho said publicly, typically in gambling, most of the revenue comes from a small number of customers at the top. So Stanley Ho introduced VIP rooms, again, for these high-value customers. But VIP rooms are difficult to control because you have to get the VIPs there. Where that money comes from and who those high rollers are is often quite complicated.
The Sun Yee-on was the first triad to recognize the potential. Movie producer Charles Hung owned a VIP room in one of Stanley Ho's casinos. The Triads offered protection to the big rollers, but also money loans, prostitutes, and drugs. Broken Tooth wanted part of the action. With unprecedented violence, he attacked the other Triads.
He was violent. He led from the front, led by example. What he did was upset the balance in Macau.
Broken Tooth next took on the king of gambling himself, heisting his flagship casino before threatening to kidnap him.
How can you prevent the Triads from taking over control of some of the casino activities?
We have our own security guards. We have a very strong force, security guards, apart from the police sent by the government to protect us.
The Portuguese colonial authorities proved to be powerless. Stanley Ho handed over the control of several of his VIP rooms to Broken Tooth. The daring gangster became boss of the 14K in Macau and started earning millions of dollars every month.
I don't see him for a long time. And I think he is not in Macau. I know it because recently I got a decision in a civil case, and I could not tell him that you win the case.
Today, Broken Tooth is in hiding. But back in the good old days, the opposite was true.
When he came to my office, he never came alone. He came always with 2 or 3 people. And he rides very nice cars. It's the first time I saw a Ferrari in Macau was with him. He was a funny guy, very kind with my children. He moved the teeth, and then he looks like he has no teeth, and then after he has got teeth. So that's why they call Broken Tooth.
The little guy who grew up in the slums of Macau posed as the new master of the city in a magazine, the first Triad boss to seek the limelight.
And that was the problem. His sense of self-importance was clearly more important than business. And that violence could not be controlled. So we managed to stop that from spilling into Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong police were given extensive powers. From then on, belonging to a triad or wearing its symbols was punishable by law.
They rounded us up all the time. They did just as they liked. There were 100 people in our group. 30 were free, 20 were in jail, and the 50 others sat waiting for their turn. My ambition was to become a boss, not a jailbird. That wasn't my plan at all.
I spent quite a bit of time in jail. I wondered if I'd end up spending my whole life in there.
I did my math. The money I had earned divided by the amount of time I spent in jail, and it came to peanuts. I was risking my life. I was working like a coolie just to earn peanuts. I should have been preparing a nice retirement for myself, rather than sit around waiting for the cops to show up.
Lau, the bruiser, and Lee, the rascal, turned their backs on crime when they left jail. In most cases, it was only the soldiers who went to jail, rarely the bosses.
That's a little bit confidential, but I just speak very general. In the criminal court, the mafia, the boss, they never did it. But if the soldier go to the court, usually they confess to say everything, just only me. Why? Just think about it. Because the first is not only loyalty, but also the compensation. They'll calculate the fee each month. It's a kind of job, it's a kind of job.
And yet, the police managed to nab the boss of the Sun Yee-on, whose pyramidal organization proved to be its undoing for once.
Operation against the Sun Yee-on started when a police officer who was a member of the Sun Yee-on gave information about the hierarchy and the alleged leader of the Sun Yee-on and the list of office bearers of the Sun Yee-on Triad Society was kept in his safe. And they arrested that leader, the other senior people. That was the most successful action against the senior levels of a Triad society.
The leader of Hong Kong's largest triad worked here at the offices of solicitors Samuel Su and Company.
And the ultimate humiliation came when reporters burst into the office of the Sun Yee-on leader, Dragonhead, the discreet brother of movie producer Charles Hung.
You must have known about his connections with the Sun Yee-on for which he was convicted.
No. I don't think it will be advisable for me to continue with this interview.
Right. It's been suggested that you are a member of the Sun Yee-on. Is that the case?
Oh, no, that is ridiculous. Your questions are too delicate.
Yes.
It should not be asked.
Dragonhead walked away scot-free, thanks to a handy fault in procedure. It was the first time that a Hong Kong gangland boss had been troubled. The Triads would do all in their power to make sure he was the last. A turning point in history would soon give them the means to do so. Along this stretch of sea between Hong Kong and China, the British noticed an increase in traffic of speedboats used by the Triads for their smuggling activities. Soon, they would no longer be on the case. Ten years earlier, the British and the Portuguese agreed to hand over Hong Kong and Macau respectively to China in 1997 and 1999. Deng Xiaoping's China promised to respect their systems of democracy. Some viewed these changes with great hope, like this pro-Beijing politician, a leader of the campaign against the British.
I was among the audience. Many people from Hong Kong have warned the Chinese government that many of the big businesses in Hong Kong have connection with these secret societies. And I think the Chinese government is aware of the problem.
The Triads might have feared the return of their old enemy, the Communists. Instead, new avenues opened up. This ship, transporting stolen cars, is given an escort by a Chinese Navy launch. As is this one, smuggling cigarettes. The Triads noted that Communist China had fallen for the charms of capitalism. And the Triads were experts in its most violent form. In China, it was time to get rich, and by any means.
We were the company that first imported Heineken into China. We're talking about a lot bigger money. To me, it was stunning. We're talking about Chinese military involving, in this and offering their service for pay to smuggle Heineken beer into China. I'm sure they deal with the Triad because it's all the smuggling involved.
"40 years after the flight of the secret societies, the Sun Yat-sen established a foothold in China. Movie producer Charles Hung came to Beijing to open the first nightclub in Communist China, 2,000 square meters spread over 4 levels. At the opening, the surprise presence of the Chinese Minister of Public Security. Shortly afterwards, he was questioned by Hong Kongese reporters.
他也可以说 好像有一种某种社团性质，或者是有的人被视为把他们看成黑社会。其实我看他们就很爱国，我跟他们也有来往。
你们对于他们是不是有？我想问一下，就是你们觉得是什么黑社会才是这个爱国的，什么是不爱国的？是怎么分解？
这个。
That was interpreted as a clear statement from the Chinese authorities that they would tolerate criminals and they didn't need to flee, they could stay, they could keep doing their business.
我有一年到了美国、加拿大，也碰到过类似的情况。
And he gave this bizarre example where he said, for example, during a recent state visit by a senior Chinese leader in another country, a Triad society provided around 800 people as a bodyguard. That's not a normal thing for a senior government leader to do.
It was later learned that Talo Siju had shares in the new nightclub. In short, he'd been bought by the Sun Yat-sen. But this case was about more than money. The minister's attitude highlighted the very strategy of the Chinese Communist Party. Still marked by the revolt on Tiananmen Square, the party looked on in horror as 1 million Hong Kongers opposed Communist China.
We are all congregated here today for this concert in support of democracy in China.
To restore order in Hong Kong, the Communist Party wanted to ensure, if not the support, then at least the neutrality of the Triads, of whose power it was well aware.
That's the way that parts of the Chinese government would work, especially United Front.
The United Front was a Communist Party strategy to work with all non-communist factions which could prove to be useful. A special ministerial office was set up for this, with one branch overseeing relations with secret societies. Its strong arm in Hong Kong was this man. He would later confide in a journalist. In Shanghai, the party met with failure when dealing with Big-eared Du. That's why I was given the order to tell the Triads that if they didn't interfere with the handover of Hong Kong, then they could carry on their business without our interference.
The focus was on a peaceful handover and making sure the British could leave with some dignity, but not on monitoring everything the Chinese authorities, the Ministry of State Security were doing in Hong Kong, because that became impossible. So there was a wind down of the China-focused officers who were given early retirement.
Martin Perbreg left the police at the handover in 1997. And the transition was smooth. Rita Fan was appointed the president of the first Hong Kong Legislative Council. Was it by chance that her father had been a business partner and assistant to Big-eared Du? She herself had worked for a company with ties to the Sun Yat-sen. From then on, the Triads, or at least their bosses, had little to fear from the police as long as their activities remained discreet. In Portuguese Macau, the handover would be in 2 years' time. The boss of the 14K, Broken Tooth, took his first steps in the movie industry. He produced a biopic about his life called Casino, a nod to Martin Scorsese's movie bearing the same name. When the authorities refused him permission to shoot on the Macau-Taipa Bridge, he had his henchmen block the traffic for a few shots of his purple Lamborghini.
Why they close the bridge? They close the bridge because, of course, they let him close the bridge. He was feeling that there is no punishment to me. I can do whatever I want. Okay.
Broken Tooth launched an ultra-violent offensive in an attempt to increase his control of the casinos. He even attacked the authorities. A failed car bomb attack targeted Macau's chief of police, who had set out to regulate gaming rooms.
The Portuguese believed very strongly that there was some influence on the Triad War by the Chinese, but certainly the Ministry of State Security, the Portuguese officers who I worked with at that time had seen contacts between Broken Tooth and some of those individuals. So their view was that the Triad conflict was encouraged to some extent and was allowed to continue until it was no longer useful.
On May 1st, 1998, a week before the premiere of his movie Casino, he was arrested by the Portuguese police. In retaliation, his men carried out no fewer than 98 attacks. Beijing dispatched the People's Liberation Army to Macau for security reasons. It went against the handover agreement, but the worn-out people cheered their arrival. In November 1999, the last act of the Portuguese presence was Broken Tooth's trial. He denied everything. The 14K never heard of them.
As far as I remember, I tell you, as far as I remember, there was no evidence of any crime, or at least a serious crime, against him. There was the crime of money laundering, but it's not a very serious situation.
The prosecutors claimed his movie was proof of his Triad membership. "It's just a movie," he replied. Broken Tooth was sentenced to 15 years in jail.
The only day he lost his temper, it was in the day of the decision. It was not only him and his mother, I remember quite well, him and his mother, because he thinks it's not fair.
Broken Tooth languished in jail. Soon, all that would be left of him was the legend that he had built.
When we were younger, we loved watching those movies together. They got us worked up, so then we'd go out and fight. But I wasn't too smart in those days.
For the Triads, the handovers of Hong Kong and Macau marked the beginning of a new era, where showy gangsters made way for respectful businessmen types. Having shown his worth in combat, the Siggy became manager of this hostess bar, the largest in Taipei and belonging to a boss of the Bamboo Union.
Lots of Triad bosses are businessmen. I was given the manager's job when I came out of jail. The promotion system depends on performances. The more guys you recruit, the more money you earn, and the more the gang earns. That's the main criteria. And then, are your guys ready to take risks? Some other mobsters found out we'd opened a hostess bar on their turf. They wanted their share of the earnings. So we called on our gang brothers. We positioned them here and there in the bar. But in the end, we decided to bargain.
The Bamboo Union owns other hostess bars like this one, including some in mainland China. Since the start of the 2000s, they make up a large part of the Triad's income. After 10 years in a California jail, White Wolf returned to Taiwan, the rebel island, yet to fall into Beijing's clutches.
是为什么要以毒品的案子？我希望重审，因为我是被设计的，因为那当年设计我人也出来讲话了。
Since helping to bring down the dictatorship, everything has changed. The first free elections took place, and with democracy, a fierce anti-mob policy was enacted. The ensuing decrease in earnings led to clashes between triads. 2 years later, a fight claimed the life of his only son.
It was our guys who started it, but my son wasn't one of them. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't want a full-scale war between the Four Seas and the Bamboo Union. Otherwise, a lot of innocent people would have been killed. You kill one of ours, I'll kill one of yours.
The rapidly rising competitor Celestial Alliance wasn't spared. The Iron Tiger, head of the Tiger outfit which supplied the Triads' henchmen, was arrested for killings over internal rivalries. He managed to avoid the death penalty.
I steadily climbed the ranks, and then I was sent to jail for 15 years. They say that a year in jail is worth 5 on the outside. In jail, you can meet a bunch of guys and gain in popularity. But naturally, there's a price to pay. You have to sacrifice your youth.
The Iron Tyrant's direct boss fled to China, as did White Wolf. To avoid his imminent arrest, he resigned himself to life in exile once again, in a land that was more welcoming this time.
I was told, get out fast. We'd invested in a plant in mainland China, so we went there.
The plant was in Shenzhen. The agglomeration neighboring Hong Kong had become the nerve center of Chinese economic growth. It is there that the Triads were allowed to invest.
In Shenzhen, I rubbed shoulders with other Triads, notably the 14K and the Sun Yan.
Naturally, the Chinese government was concerned. The term Triads was mentioned for the very first time in the country's criminal law. Their money and entrepreneurial spirit were, however, more than welcome. The Triads invested in real estate, hotels, restaurants, transport, and nightclubs. The Sun Yi-on was the best organized and had the biggest presence, with several thousand members. But the Triads didn't stop at their traditional activities.
The manufacturing hub is mainly based in China, so they also involve in a lot of counterfeit product sales and trafficking as well. So it becomes more and more, what we call the cross-border businesses or operation within the Triad societies.
Counterfeit products, only a tiny amount of which are seized, contributed to China's spectacular growth. The Triads reinvest the money they earn in China on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, the biggest financial marketplace in Asia.
They were 17 very comfortable years. I didn't deal with any of the management. I was just a 25% shareholder. My daily life was divided into 3 activities: reading books, keeping fit, and entertaining guests.
Among the guests, White Wolf met a number of princelings, descendants of senior communists who had converted to capitalism, including a police general.
I had very good relationships with them. They'd come for dinner at my home, often by bicycle.
The Triads excelled in the corrupt world of Chinese capitalism. Here's a member of the Hung family posing with the governor of the Shenzhen region at the opening of the film museum. Contrary to the regime's hopes, the Triads weren't content in investing legally. In Shenzhen, the Sun Yee-on founded a new branch, the Flying Eagles, to take care of traditional underworld business, like drug dealing, extortion rackets, and prostitution. In an era of all-conquering globalization, the Triads looked further. They noticed that Western governments were making it easy for Hong Kongers who feared a return to China to emigrate. Police officer Gary Clement was posted at the Canadian Embassy. He discovered that numerous Triad members were applying and obtaining visas.
Working with Royal Hong Kong Police, I realized just how entrenched the Triads had become in society. I just think there was a real naivety. Our High Commissioner was on holidays in Toronto, and he holidayed with a Triad member. And, you know, I came back to him and said, "What are you doing?" But you've got a High Commissioner that's blind to it. How do you expect the rest of the staff to operate?
His warnings went unheeded. Even worse, he discovered that the embassy's immigration service was rife with corruption.
I wrote a report back to Ottawa and said, you know, if Canada doesn't get its act together, Vancouver will displace Hong Kong. You know, we were willfully blind by allowing all these Triads to get into the country. I have one picture of Campbell. He used to be the former premier in Vancouver and posted in the front page of the South China Morning Post with the Hung family, with his arms raised in the air.
The Triads began investing in Vancouver, where the Sun Yee-on bought companies, buildings, and casinos. Gary Clement sensed a new threat, not purely criminal this time. On his return to Canada, he contributed to an intelligence service report which stated, "The cooperation between Hong Kong businessmen, the Triads, and the leaders in Beijing is a new strategy by Chinese intelligence. Their attempts to influence our economy and Canadian personalities are a serious threat." The report would be buried for 25 years by the powers that be. Since the start of the 2000s, the Triads have established footholds in Canada, but also in the Netherlands, Australia, the United States, and even in the home of the former colonial power.
My boss emigrated to Britain. In general, the Triads go wherever the Chinese go.
Alongside their traditional activities, the Triads racket and exploit Chinese immigrants, their primary victims.
Well, is there a triad problem here, do you think?
I don't know, you know.
So, well, I've got a picture here which shows people wearing triad T-shirts outside your restaurant. How can you say there's no triad problem when...
Oh, I think this one is only to the opening, you know. I don't know the people only come, especially come for line dancing when the opening, you know.
There's fear. Most of them won't come to police because they recognize the police as naive and don't understand it. But triads are here, and they're having a tremendous negative impact on society.
The Triads have benefited greatly from the past decades, following their return to the Chinese mainland and their international expansion. Here, a leader of the Woxing Wo, Hong Kong's third most influential triad, is celebrating his birthday.
I am happy because my boss has always supported me.
The event is organized by Uncle Ma, the director of the city's most popular newspaper, founded by former heroin trafficker and ostensibly pro-Beijing.
They call me the cleanup man. Deputy Wang Yak Man?
Here.
Super. If I have forgotten you, I offer you my head. If you betray me, I'll cut off your head.
The man singled out is an influential politician and opponent of the Democratic Party.
Let's have some entertainment.
At the end of today's lottery, the newspaper will share out $2 million among the lucky winners, one of whom is the politician.
At the next elections, don't forget to vote for Liang Angqi. I'll give 100 million to those who vote. 100 million.
Beyond their traditional bastions in the south of China, the Triads exert a cultural influence across all of a rapidly evolving Chinese society. That explains the huge success that this Hong Kong movie franchise has enjoyed for so many years. It depicts the Triads in a glamorous light and is directly inspired by mobsters such as Broken Tooth.
講出嚟都唔信啊！呢一年嚟朝早，
我去沖涼先，唔阻你哋。車嚟啦！出来！你知道你做过什么？
Benefiting from weakness in central government and widespread corruption, organized crime has flourished. In Chengdu, gangs fight openly on the streets. Elsewhere, they kill each other for control of the mahjong houses. In Chongqing, with a population of 30 million, a certain Mama-san, a friend of the police chief and head of a private army, has bled the city dry. those with good political contacts prosper. Desmond Schum, a former beer importer, married a member of the Prime Minister's family. In the early 2010s, he built China's largest airport, close to Beijing.
We really trying to do our best to be, quote unquote, the cleanest we can be in the system we were in. We don't interact with the mafia. In our case, we need to remove 5 villages, relocate 5 villages to clean out the land. What we do is we pay the local government to do that. And then they will use their means to do it. And obviously, one of the means they use is they will use basically local triad, local mafia to do some of the job they do, right?
Every year, hundreds of thousands of people who refuse to move house for future real estate developments suffer the same fate. Some are detained in what are known as black jails, run by the mob. And meanwhile, the big winners of Chinese growth, like Desmond Schum, amass considerable fortunes.
None of our we business people in China ever feel safe under CCP. They can come over, and confiscate everything. So there is always a debate, is how much money we leave in China and how much money we keep it out of China. That's a constant debate to all business people, every business person in China, and in a way to every person. Even my senior staff, right? My staff will have bank account in Hong Kong. And the other part of it is a lot of people use the Macau as a channel to funnel money out of China. Use the casino to funnel money out of China.
In Macau, the nouveau riche, from top management to the oligarch, often found themselves dealing with a group called Sun City. It was founded by this man, Alvin Chow. He was once a protege of the renowned Broken Tooth inside the 14K. He started his business thanks to a loan from his mentor. We regularly visited during his time in jail. After his meteoric rise, Alvin Chow distanced himself from Broken Tooth and even forged ties with the Sun Yee-on.
Before, this area was just farm fields. Now, it's better than Las Vegas.
In the VIP rooms inside his casinos, Alvin Chow offered to turn his wealthy clients' money into tokens for gaming, or into fresh money.
Dear friends, I hope you have a very good time with us.
Former police officer Martin Perbrick is now a consultant for companies worried about being infiltrated by the Triads.
The casinos in Macau, and in particular the junkets, have become underground banks. If you have 10 million US to launder, you pay 3% of that to launder it through the casino. So it can go into the cash cage in the casino, and then you lose 3% and it comes out as a check. It's pure money laundering, nothing else, yeah.
Alvin Chow offered an even more attractive service where you didn't even have to physically move your cash. For an initial deposit, Sun City lent 5 to 10 times the amount, which was then transferred to foreign bank accounts. The loan would then be paid back in China with tainted money. Alvin Chow's group was also equipped with a reliable network of debt collectors. The former 14K soldier built a fortune even bigger than that of the traditional casino owners. Like old Stanley Ho, seen here at the end of his career. During 2012, an estimated $200 to $400 billion made its way through Sun City's VIP rooms. In Macau, part of the Chinese GDP was escaping from the state's coffers, while growth was seemingly falling. Here, a stone's throw from Shenzhen, 2,000 Chinese soldiers had to battle for 6 hours to take control of a village where tons of crystal meth are made for a triad. Crime and corruption were leaving citizens exasperated. The Triads had begun to represent a danger for the Chinese authorities. And so it was that a new leader emerged, a barely known technocrat.
There was a dinner with Xi Jinping and his wife. Xi Jinping didn't say much, and then his wife was doing all the saying, and to the point it seems kind of strange. So the assumption at the time was, things going to carry on as it has been over the last 20, 30 years. Obviously, we are all wrong.
Our party will fight against these criminals without rest. We will show no mercy to those who are corrupt.
Wiping out criminals from the bottom to the top of society was the plan to restore order announced by Xi Jinping. The police forces of China, Hong Kong, and Macau launched spectacular joint anti-mob operations. During one of them, 51,000 people were arrested.
Sources of income have dried up. Now the big crooks prefer doing dishes in a restaurant. It pays less, but at least you're left in peace.
In reality, it was basically troublemakers or executors who were targeted. Or sometimes Xi Jinping's political enemies, like this gang boss who was close to his predecessor.
You are sentenced to death.
I take full responsibility for my actions.
The message was clear. You must submit to the new strongman and interests of the party. It was then that a famous inmate walked free after 13 years in jail.
It was a stupid life. The jail is very small and very humid. We cannot say he has a bad behavior inside. No, he respects the rules of the jail, but they never give him the parole. He has been all day since the first day until the last day, he has been in jail.
I have nightmares almost every day. It's a constant battle. I'm 58 now. I've maybe got 10 years left. It's a waste of time to keep fighting.
Alvin Chow, his former lieutenant, was warned. Broken Tooth wants his place back. But his long prison sentence had left him unaware of the changes that had taken place in Beijing. His brutal, showy methods were a thing of the past.
A very large dinner was held for him. Over 100 tables, so each table is 10 or 12 people. It was a lot of people. And he was given a very big present in cash. I think it was well over $10 million to go and do whatever he wants, but not to be involved in the casino business and not to be involved with Sun City or other junkets.
Alvin Chow was untouchable. He was protected by the Communist Party officials who were on his payroll. While waiting for a chance to get back into the game, Broken Tooth used his fame to do business and even create his own brand of beer. And even more surprisingly, the former hothead of the 14K forged ties with the Chinese Communist Party.
Hello, man.
In 2012, the new boss of the party had a new dream: to turn China into the world's biggest superpower.
Comrades, serve the people.
The Triads understood that from then on, if they wanted to keep getting rich, they would have to serve Xi Jinping's huge ambitions.